A mentally ill prison inmate in South Dade is sadistically killed when a guard locks him in a scalding hot shower. 2 years later, no one has been charged with a crime. Why not?
Hand in hand for Haiti. We are taking you there. A rare one-on-one with Haiti's president at a state-of-the-art earthquake-resistant school with South Florida connections.
The tentacles of the Scott Rothstein scandal touch two more BSO deputies. They are now under scrutiny for ties to the convicted Ponzi schemer. Good morning. So glad you could join us. We have a jam-packed hour ahead for you.
You heard our big stories headlined, and our Powerhouse Roundtable is ready to rumble. We take on Broward judges arrested for DUI. All aboard Florida on track. And what about the presumed suicide bomber in Syria who was from Florida?
Again, another South Florida connection to a big national story. And then we will have my personal perspective about all the third graders in Florida who failed their FCAT reading test. But we begin this morning with the disturbing deaths of 3 mentally ill prison inmates in Florida. It appears they were tortured and abused by prison guards. This is one of the victims. His name is Darren Rainey. He was a 50-year-old mentally ill inmate at the Dade Correctional Institution, that is a state prison in Deep South Dade. A guard there put Rainey into a scalding hot shower for 1 hour. It was supposed to be punishment for defecating in his cell and then refusing to clean it up. But Rainey was left in that locked shower stall for that hour. He screamed in agony. No one came to his help. His skin was so badly burned that it had shriveled from his body. Miami Herald investigative reporter Julie K. Brown broke that story about the death of Darren Rainey and 2 other deaths of mentally ill inmates in the state. Dr. George Mallinckrodt, well, it's not doctor, he is George Mallinckrodt. He is a licensed mental health worker, and he was working at the correctional institution in South Dade where Darren Rainey died. He filed numerous complaints about the systematic abuse of mentally ill inmates, and for his trouble, he was fired. Judge Steve Fleifman is a nationally and internationally recognized leader for reform in the treatment of the mentally ill involved in the criminal justice system. He is largely responsible for more than 4,000 police officers in Miami-Dade being trained in how to deal with the mentally ill. To all of you, good morning. Great to have you come in. Julie, some outstanding reporting. Tell us about Darren Rainey and how he died.
Mr. Rainey was an inmate who was serving a 2-year prison stretch for a drug charge. He had apparently done something in his cell, we believe. From what we've heard, he had defecated in his cell, and the guards wanted him to clean himself up. He had refused. So they, what we do know from the little amount of information that we've been given from the State Department of Corrections is that a guard placed him in his cell shortly before 8 o'clock. This was 2 years ago, September.
June 23rd, 2012. Yeah.
And from what we understand from people who were there at the time, they turned on a shower. This was a shower that had not previously been used because the controls on the interior of the shower, by the way, this shower is more like a phone booth. Yeah. And the controls were broken, and they were only controlled by the main switch by the guards themselves. And he had been placed in there, and the controls were turned on, and apparently he had been screaming in there for help. I won't do it again. And all the inmates that were in that unit at the time could hear him screaming. Yeah. And it wasn't for quite some time, depending on whose statement it was at least an hour that he was in there screaming.
Yeah. George Mallinckrodt, you were employed there. You were providing mental health services at the Dade Correctional Institution. When did you hear about Rainey's death, and what did you do about it?
Well, I had been fired 10 months previously, essentially for speaking out against inmate abuse. An inmate named Joseph Swilling was beaten, and I refused to stay silent about it. My coworker, 10 months later, called me up and said, "They killed him." And that was the first instance that I heard about it.
Yeah, now you had gone earlier to the warden of DCI. You talked about the systematic abuse that you said you had personally witnessed. What did the warden do?
Well, he tasked me with doing incident reports as I heard abuse from the inmates in my unit. And so I had done 3 or 4 of these reports, and then I was fired.
Yeah. You went to the Department of Justice, too, to try to get some action, did you?
Yes. Immediately after I had heard of Rainey's death, I, through a circuitous route, ended up interviewing with FBI agents. And they were interested in putting a wire on my former coworker to ostensibly find out what these guards were doing, except that we didn't have any interaction with these guards. But then, as the thing unfolded, eventually I sent in a complaint to the Department of Justice in Washington.
Yeah. You know, but Judge Leifman, the fact is, it's almost 2 years, and nothing has happened. Now, at the forum that you organized and put together, mental health providers, consumers, and police agencies on Thursday in Miami, you described what happened to Rainey as murder.
It's horrific, and it's hard to believe this goes on in the United States and in our own state. It's unacceptable. And part of the problem, and there's absolutely no excuse for what went on, is that we have reduced access to community services so much that so many people are ending up in the criminal justice system. In fact, the fastest growing, they call it a subpopulation of people in Florida's prisons are people with mental illnesses. It's grown by 178%.
Yeah. Let me cite
in 10
those
years.
figures if I could, Steve.
Sure.
In 2000, I think you've told me this, 6,800
That's right.
prison inmates were classified as mentally ill. In 2014, nearly 18,000. I mean, that's just a huge
It is.
growth.
And they didn't train the guards to handle it, and there's apparently a culture in these facilities that is horrible and unacceptable. And so you have people supposedly protecting people and guarding people that they don't know how to handle. And so they exacerbate the problem. Most of these individuals have serious trauma before they get into the prison. They're getting re-traumatized, and they're abusing them as a result.
Yeah, Julie, when you have tried to reach out and ask for public records from the State Department of Corrections, you've been stonewalled a lot.
We've been stonewalled a lot, and more concerning to us is the fact that much of the information that we are receiving has been heavily redacted.
Yeah.
There was one witness that we know of who was an inmate who wrote a letter to the Inspector General's office at the time this happened, said that he saw it, he was asked to clean up the crime scene, those were his words, and that he was very disturbed. He called it a killing, and he was...
Was this Harold Hempstead? This was...
No, this was
another one?
This was another one, and they did interview him, but they never transcribed the interview. We were the ones that recently ordered a transcription of that. So it's very telling to us that the police didn't order a transcript of this interview, of this witness. DOC apparently didn't order the transcript, so he gave his statement, and in any event, when we received the transcript, literally every single thing in the transcript is redacted
Yeah,
out.
so you have a piece of paper that essentially is blacked out. Most of it is blacked out. Then, subsequent to the death of Darren Rainey, another inmate in that mental health unit named Richard Mayer, age 40, hung himself from the air conditioning vent, but he wrote a suicide note before he died alleging all kinds of abuse. Describe what did Mayer's note
Well,
say?
Mr. Mayer had already filed a grievance before he committed suicide, alleging all these incidences in detail. And the Inspector General wanted the names of some of these guards that had committed some of these things. They were sexual assaults against him. They were there's apparently some kind of a practice allegedly in the prison called empty or air trays, where they starve these patients as well. They just give them empty trays.
They deny them food.
Skip
Deny-
trays. We
skip
call them
trays.
skipping trays.
Skip trays?
Skipping
Yeah.
trays.
Oh, skipping trays.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he had, in any event, the Inspector General apparently said, well, you're not giving us any names, we don't have anything to go on. So that grievance went nowhere in particular, except the guards that were guarding him knew he made the complaint, and the mistreatment continued to the point where he felt compelled to commit suicide, and he did. And he did say in his suicide note, okay, I'm naming names now. And he named all the names of everyone involved,
All
the
right, so
guards.
police authorities, the prison system has names, and I mean, the question, George, is what has been done to your knowledge?
In my experience, this is just par for the course. When I was actually there and I wouldn't sit still for that beating, and I started to name names in the incident report, I did an incident report regarding the beating, nothing happened. The guards who beat him were still working there, and I
No
I was
punishment, no
incredulous.
investigation?
In fact, some of them have been promoted. Some of them involved have been
You know,
promoted after these
it
things.
goes to the double stigma. They're already stigmatized because they have a mental illness, but now they're criminals with mental illness, so they're almost considered subhuman, and no one's going to listen. And but for the reporting by Julie, none of us ever would have known this.
That's absolutely right. I certainly wouldn't have known, and the Department of Corrections doesn't send out news releases with any of this stuff. Judge Leifman, I have to say, to my knowledge, Governor Scott, in light of your reporting, Julie, has not called in the head of the Department of Corrections and demanded answers. Frankly, you would hope that he would do that.
Well, I'd hope a lot of people would do that.
Yeah.
The Justice Department should be there, the state attorney should be there, because it happened in Miami-Dade County, so she has jurisdiction, and the governor should be there. And none of us can turn our heads, because it's going to continue to happen or get worse if there isn't swift action taken.
Well, that's going to be the last word, but we are going to follow this. And Julie, thanks for your reporting. I know, unfortunately, there's more to come, isn't there?
Yes.
Okay.
There is.
All right. George Mellencrot, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it very much. All right. Let's get over to Glenna now, who has more on what she has coming up. Glenna?
Thank you, Michael. Coming up when we come back, we are taking you to St. Mark, Haiti, where President Michel Martelly gave us a rare one-on-one interview at a model school with South Florida connections, and you'll see why when we come back.
My first thought was, that it's an amazing opportunity to make a difference to the country and to bring change to children.
It's a complex country, as you know, welcoming people, but the politics are pretty complicated.
They are the change makers, and South Florida is well represented, laying the foundation for what could be a seismic change in how Haitian children learn. Best practices, well-trained teachers, cultural infusion, all in a hurricane-proof, earthquake-resistant, sustainable school in St. Mark, Haiti. In this region of poverty and hardship, the school is all expenses paid for eventually 700 students plus uniforms, books, even meals, all provided. The new school, built entirely on private donations, is considered such a model for change that Haiti's president attended its official opening recently. And so did we. President Michel Martelly gave us a rare one-on-one interview about its possibilities.
You look at these beautiful, happy children with an unbelievable possibility here, and you leave the gates, and tell me your biggest challenge for the children to be educated.
Well, first of all, I must say that I'm happy that I have the chance to experience this project, because through these kids, I see the success of this model already. And I'm very interested at helping Oliver to replicate this, because I'm the very first president who came to Haiti, came in power, and made of education a priority. I have said free access to education. It's a fact today. But our problem is that our infrastructures are nothing like this. Our teachers are not trained and do not have the capacity of those who left the States or Canada who are working here.
Sure.
The environment is not the same.
Of course.
So in these kids, I see kids who are just at the beginning of their studies but seem to be brighter than kids who have finished school in the past and do not know much. So this is an important project.
With all the money that has been given and donated to create this model, how do you replicate that across Haiti with the resources that this country has?
Well, I'll have experts think over this, but the thing is, you don't have to think about the amount of money first, but the objective. Now, what's the problem of Haiti? I think education is number one. We look like a country who has been at war, and we've never been to war. We have a mentality problem. We have a lack of education. So it's time for us now to send everybody to school so they can be educated, get back to civism, value their country, their flag, think another way, get rid of that auto-destructive mentality.
Cultural change, a change in culture.
Certainly. And I believe when you have the opportunity to have this type of education, your state of mind changes, you become more productive for yourself, your family, and your country. So the money, I'm sure we'll find it. On this project, there is still some issues. For instance, I know of the water problem. They have spent a huge amount of money to find water around here, and there is no water. And yet, that hasn't stopped my friend here from being so engaged in making this a success. That's why I have promised him to share this problem with him. We're going to use the state, see how we can bring the national company, use some funds from the European Union, about $200 million just for water, see if they can come in and help us. Because we're not talking about spending money, we're talking about saving kids, we're talking about giving life, we're talking about changing the environment. So it's worth whatever amount needs to be spent on this. We're talking about education.
And this country gets quite a considerable amount of foreign aid, a bit of money from the United States government. And I read the government reports, the GAO reports in October, showing that the United States USAID money here is not really meeting the goals that it set out to meet.
Well, just because in the past they have identified alone their projects and do projects. Now we have put in place the CAED, which is called an institution that coordinates the aid. these NGOs, USAID and others, now they come to us. They work with us. We identify our priorities and they inject money in those sectors. So yes, in the past it was a mess, but today we are changing the way things are done. And just a few days ago, the number 2 at the State Department was here, and they are very impressed with our progress, and they want us to tell them how to move forward. So people have more confidence in Haiti now. I have done a lot of efforts in 2 years to be in every international platform to show this new Haiti, this new movement. Of course, people's lives has not changed here, but the momentum has changed. The government has changed. Today you have a government that's responsible, who wants to provide service, who doesn't prioritize rebuilding the palace first. We can work from a small office. Right now, instead of rebuilding the palace, I would rather make sure that these kids have water. I would rather make sure that we can replicate this in every department. So with this confidence, with Haiti being present, not asking for aid, but trade, Haiti taking to the world its opportunities, offering opportunities, Haiti almost refusing donation, but asking for investment so we can create jobs. People are more confident into coming here. And with the nice numbers that we have too, economic growth, we went from 2.5% to 4.3. Inflation is down from 6.5 to 4.5. Haiti is ranked number 47, right after the United States in freedom of speech, and so many other good news. Haiti is one of the most secured countries in the region, and it's a fact based on the numbers. 7 deaths for every 100,000 people.
You know, I'm listening to you speak, and I'm thinking to myself that this generation of children are going to be growing up knowing a different message than perhaps their parents or grandparents did.
Knowing a different message, but being part of a new Haiti. They are the new Haiti. Because, you know, there's no limit when you have this. And they seem to be on the right path with what's being done here. I can see it, I can sense it, because being the leader of that change on education, I visit many schools and I see it. I see that kids are restrained, they are shy, they are afraid of people, they don't really have the right information, they don't speak even Creole, you know. Now with this type of program, I see a new generation. And I'm not saying that it's only happening here. This is surely a success, but this is, for being such a success, I would like to every other school to be like this one.
That's a daunting goal, President Martelli. I'm so appreciative of your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and let me take this opportunity.
You can see a full report on that school if you like. We're putting that together for you now, how it all came together and who is involved in it. A lot of South Florida people included, and this plan to grow a new generation of leaders in Haiti. And that'll be tomorrow night on Local 10 News at 11, and of course on local10.com.
I'll be watching a country of such promise and so many problems.
And I know you've been there several times.
I have been there dozens of times, and it leaves you both exhilarated and in despair at the same time. It's a strange place.
Right. Well, good.
All right, coming up, we are setting the round table, getting the take of our experts on the top news of the week, and we also want to hear from you while we are hashing it all out.
Yes, never a dull news moment in South Florida, and that is not even counting the Miami Heat right now.
Right.
Judges, DUI, the launch of All Aboard Florida, a presumed terrorist again with ties to Florida. We invite you to join in the conversation right now. Email, Facebook, Twitter, pick your poison.
And we want to talk about those topics and perhaps even get to a few others with our Powerhouse Roundtable. Here is today's Powerhouse lineup. That is Bernadette Pardo, a veteran South Florida journalist, currently a columnist for the El Nuevo Herald, host of a morning show on WQBA, Radio Mambi, with her program Pedaleando con Bernie.
Que bueno.
Que bueno. Billy Corbin is a high-profile documentary filmmaker based in Miami. He first made his mark with Cocaine Cowboys, in which I say I appeared as a much younger person. Billy and his studio raconteur take on some of South Florida's most controversial issues. And Michael Mayo, my friend, is a columnist for the Sun Sentinel. His column covers all the hot topics of interest in Broward and in the state. What a lineup.
Did he get a credit on Cocaine Cowboys?
Well, I didn't have a credit. I just had...
Tall blonde man, I think is what it said in the end credits.
Oh, that narrows it down right
That's
there.
all right. Mike Mayo, what in the heck is going on with judges in Broward County? 3 women, 3 judges now have been arrested, and we're not trying to judge Lynn Rosenthal. She may or may not be guilty, but I mean, they are drinking, they're using pills. I mean, this is really a sad kind of trend.
You know, I would use, you know, like a joke, like it must be something in the water or the kegs at the courthouse, but it's actually, it is sad because judges are the ones who are sitting in judgment of others, and they should be held to a higher standard. And right now, the standards have been pretty low at the Broward Courthouse. You know, we've had these 3 separate incidents, and you know how the media likes the old thing is if it happens once, then it's kind of an anomaly. If it happens twice, oh, okay, it's 3 times it's a trend. So. I don't know if there's something going on where there's a lot of behind-the-scenes pressures there, or just now the pressures of being a judge and elected judges, especially now who now do face opponents. I don't know what's happening. Each case is unique, and each case is sad in its own way. I just would want to comment on the latest case with Judge Rosenthal, where she maintained it was just a single Ambien pill, but then wouldn't acquiesce to taking a blood or urine sample. And then she also tried to have quash the release of her mugshot, which to me really rubbed me the wrong way. Look, I'm in sympathy if somebody has any kind of problem, who knows what their personal situation is, but don't consider yourself above the law and try to invoke some arcane and actually non-existent. It didn't apply in her case to try to not release the mugshot.
Actually, there is a statute that would cover her because she used to be an assistant U.S. attorney. And assistant U.S. attorneys are covered under the public records laws that takes them out of the mugshot.
And I would counter that would be true, except our lawyers, the Sun Sentinel, kind of filed a claim against that, saying that because she is a sitting judge who's up for re-election, has been self-publishing her own photos and campaign material,
there you go.
that you lose that claim of privacy.
You know, Billy, I saw on a blog post from the Broward County Courthouse, a number of people said, you know, not only judges, but the lawyers and people who deal with criminals every day and you know, a pretty rough lot, that, you know, drinking a lot and sometimes drugs, smoking a little weed or something is just what these people do.
Well, to be fair, if I were a judge in Broward County, I'd want to be drunk all the time, too, especially at work, I would think, on the bench. And the reality is I have a lot of sympathy for people struggling with substance abuse problems. I had seen addiction strike very closely in my family, and there is a very fair argument to be made that this is an illness and should be treated as such. And even more of an argument that can be made, because I'm a big proponent of holding public officials to a higher standard.
Yes.
And there's so rarely accountability these days, particularly in this community. That having been said, they are innocent until proven guilty, and arguably this might actually make them better jurists. Being on the other side of the system, you know, spending a night in jail, having a better appreciation for what defendants and suspects go through might actually give them a new perspective and make them better at their job.
You know what strikes me about this, though, and Bernie, weigh in on this. This woman, okay, Ambien or no Ambien aside, she hit a concrete barrier, she hit the gates at the courthouse, she hit 3 separate things.
A patrol car, I think.
And a patrol car,
That's
exactly.
not a good thing.
And never said anything about it. Does that not go to character?
Well, you know, I'm going to be devil's advocate. First of all, I think
you do that really well.
Yeah, very well. judge's advocate in this case. But, you know, there are 87 other judges who have not been drinking on the job. Yet, or you don't know about, but, you know, they say the same thing about us journalists. So they are human beings. And I think rather than, the problem is not alcohol. I think the problem is elections. I don't think judges should be.
Wow, that's a tweetable comment right there.
That it's a problem because it does not foster the best system of justice.
Yeah.
Well, most judges need to know about law, and when you make them candidates and
well, they also solicit and take financial contributions from the lawyers who appear before them.
Excellent point.
that is just
it's awful.
Corrupt system in my view.
But let's not lose sight of the fact that the way they first get on the bench is to be appointed, and usually by these committees of other lawyers, but it has to go through the whole governor's office. So basically, first they're appointed by the governor, and then they stand for election when they get retained. So it's kind of a mixed system where it's first appointed, and I don't know, the flip side is, okay, then you just have appointments and they sit there for life?
Well, that
is that really what we want?
But maybe you should have some kind of standard that proves these people are really... Judges, unlike many other lawyers, should be devoted to the law, you know, and that is something that you lose when you go...
In terms of not reporting these various accidents she was involved in, if you've ever taken Ambien, you don't remember half the things you do on Ambien, so there might be some legitimacy to that. However, I do want to say, though, that when it comes to, I think the ultimate takeaway from this is that none of these judges, with the exception of the one who knew she wasn't drinking alcohol, submitted to any breathalyzer, blood or urine test, and that's really the takeaway. Any good lawyer will tell you, yes, you'll relinquish your license for a year and maybe spend, you know, the night sleeping on a concrete floor, but don't submit to the test.
Although Ambien is not one of the drugs that you can be busted for DUI for.
And that might need
I'm sorry, what are we talking about again?
No, Ambien, obviously, there's a host of side effects that can come with taking it. And this incident happened, let's remember, on a Tuesday morning while she was getting into work to come onto the bench after a long holiday weekend. So if she took that pill the night before, Ambien has had a whole long list of, you know, these incidents in the news where weird things happen. But we might want to also revisit whether Ambien, the use of Ambien, should be something that is considered
a controlled
DUI.
Substance list. Yeah, no, just to button this up, Bernie, I think your point is an excellent one. Appellate court judges and state Supreme Court judges in Florida are on the bench through merit retention. And there is a public process, and then you vote to keep them or not keep them. Only trial court judges run for office, and it does lead to some disasters. Let's move on, if I can. Billy Corbin, I want to get your take on a soccer stadium at the FEC boat slip in Miami. What do you think?
Well, I think you have to look at who are the proponents for this. I mean, Carlos Jimenez, who last year told us that the offer from Stephen Ross on his sports welfare deal on Dolphin Stadium was going to be the best deal that we were going to get. I think a year on, PolitiFact might categorize that as pants on fire. I think the deal is much sweeter now than it was a year ago. And here's a mayor who, in an April public appearance, was asked about constituent services that he had promised that he said, quote, fell through the cracks. So here you go. Constituent services fall through the cracks, but every time David Beckham calls or Mickey Arison calls or Stephen Ross calls, they not only get a meeting with the mayor, but the mayor puts staff who are on our payroll as taxpayers to work you know, around the clock to negotiate these sports welfare deals.
And the mayor offered up a property that was not in the county, but in Miami.
Why don't these folks come into town and hire a realtor instead of the mayor, is what I want to know. Like any other businessman would do when you're looking for a location for your business. I don't really understand that. And I think that's really, the issue here has to do with access and money and power.
Yeah. Bernie,
I don't understand how you can build a stadium basically on a houseboat.
The first underwater soccer stadium.
Well, can I say there are entire subdivisions built on swampland, so somehow they figure that out. Right?
Well, it's going to cost about $20 million to fill it in, but David Beckham on this program said, hey, no problem, we've got $20 million to do that. Mike?
Well, so, my bigger questions is, is there really a need for this? And if this group wants to come here and do it, and, they say they want to spend it, use their own money, but they still want some breaks and things from the public. They want to get public land that wouldn't be available to anybody.
They pay rent on it. They say, look, we'll pay fair market value.
What is fair market value?
Who knows what fair market value is?
Well, this is the problem. Mayor Jimenez said in one breath, or out of one side of his mouth, I might say, that he wants fair market rent for it, but then also said that while they shopped private comparable private parcels of land that the prices were exorbitant. Isn't exorbitant then fair market value when you compare other parcels of land? And the Biscayne Corridor is going to turn into like Sunny Isles, just a wall that you don't even know the body of water is a half block away.
Meanwhile, you know, we're so busy talking about Beckham and this proposed soccer stadium. What's really slid under the radar is the whole new heat renegotiation of the lease with the arena, and of course, winning makes everybody numb or, you know, not pay attention. It's like, yeah, go Heat, and then meanwhile, you know, while the playoffs are going on and hopefully another run to another title, there's this other new sweetheart deal for Mickey Arison. And
well, it's not quite as sweet as the one Mickey wanted.
It's a lot better than the one they...
Can we take a quick break? We gotta pay some bills. Let's continue this when we come back.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
Well, you guys don't need much prodding. Welcome back live in our studio on this Sunday morning, our Powerhouse Roundtable. And Bernie Pardo, the fact of the matter is, for 14 years, the deal the Miami Heat had with Miami-Dade County resulted in less than $300,000 in profits being shared. At least on the new lease extension, they're going to give $1 million a year to the County Parks Department.
And it's a 5-year extension. And also, somebody's got to keep this stadium up because, after all, it's the only thing that remains to the county. That's the property. It's valued like $300 million. Or
right. But in order to get that $1 million in rent, what does the county have to give up? They still subsidize a bunch.
$6.4 million a year.
So is that really a good?
And then it goes up more than $8 million after.
Let's go back to the bigger picture. The bigger picture is this: in this country, we subsidize the people who need help the least. The billionaire owners, Mickey Arison, the millionaire athletes, LeBron James. Meanwhile, earlier this show, you did a segment about how woefully underfunded services are for the mentally ill.
Right.
I mean, that just shows you how crazy, pardon the pun, we are as a society.
Politicians are always trying to draw a line and say, oh, well, this is not the Marlins deal. And you're right, it's very different. The Marlins deal was welfare for a millionaire. This is welfare for a billionaire. So very different, very different deals.
And you know what really rankles me is this whole argument of like, well, you've got to do this now because, you know, otherwise we're going to have to build a new building, or, you know, we might need to go somewhere else. They just built this building to replace another pink elephant, the old Miami Arena, and it's like, what's the life expectancy of an arena? I mean, I'm in a house that's 50 years old. Can't these teams stay in a arena, one place for 50 years?
And now the BB&T Center in Broward is asking for a huge subsidy from the county tourism taxes.
And that's even worse because the Panthers don't even know how to win. So at least with the Heat, we get a little bit of something in return. We get some good euphoria.
Something that I found interesting, the fact that arenas might become kind of like TV studios in the future because most people like to watch from home.
They already are TV studios inside most of them.
Well, but what I'm saying is that fronts, basically, not a huge kind of venue.
For live events in general, the quality of the experience is going down while the cost is going up, and to stay at home and watch, the quality of the experience is going up while that cost is going down.
You got the Skybox. That's what they sell for.
All right, I want to ask you all to kind of give us your take on this another disturbing story in the news. A 22-year-old man who lived in Vero Beach is discovered to have gone to Syria, gotten in a truck that was loaded with explosives, and blown up a number of people and himself. His name is Moner Mohammed Absullah. And I mean, this is a guy who, you know, only a few years ago was playing basketball on the street and grew up as an American, and suddenly he is a jihadist.
They say Syria is going to be the really new breeding ground for this kind of thing.
Right, well, 70...
There's supposed to be like 100 Americans already in that.
I don't know if it's a breeding ground so much as a magnet. We saw the same phenomenon in first Afghanistan and then Iraq when the U.S. invaded Iraq, is these jihadists go there, and then but the central question is what causes a typical mild-mannered American to radicalize and then want to blow himself up. And it, I guess, boils down to you get, you know, either religious fervor or also lack of opportunity. Maybe he saw a dead end here in the United States. I don't know.
Well, I've got 5 words, and you can hashtag it if you'd like. There's always a Florida connection.
Always.
But I think that goes to the more serious issue of understanding Florida's connection to 9/11, for example, a little bit better, and what the FBI is not telling us about the family in Sarasota. Was it? And Bob Graham has been trying to get those documents released.
For years.
That's true.
Yeah. And finally, he's made some progress, and Judge Locke in Fort Lauderdale has ordered the FBI to comply and make some of those documents available.
Yeah, and let me give a shout out to my friend Dan Christensen. The BrowardBulldog.org has been doing some really good investigative work on that whole situation with that family in Sarasota.
And I want to say I was sorry that I was late today. I was stopped and frisked by Miami Gardens police.
I don't know.
And you'll get the red light ticket.
May I say?
And you'll get the red light ticket in 5 weeks.
You want to explain the Miami Gardens briefly?
A network investigation into what appears to be a stop and frisk policy where, a 5-year-old was stopped and frisked?
Suspicious 99-year-old. You had 57.
In the hundreds.
Yeah, 57,000 stop and frisks, 0 people arrested. You seem to have a systematic infringement of civil rights in Miami Gardens going on, and nobody's doing anything about it.
It's going to be our topic for
follow
next
up
time.
on that. Mike Mayo and Billy Corbin, Bernadette Pardo, great to have you come in.
Thank
you. You will be back. And when we come back, we're going to have 2 more Broward Sheriff's deputies. Story about them. They are under scrutiny for ties to that Ponzi schemer, Scott Rothstein.
And Bob Norman is at their door. Stay with us.
I am a good guy. I'm a straight up cop. I mean, just gotta wait and see.
Two Broward Sheriff's deputies suspended. More fallout from the Scott Rothstein investigation. Two high-ranking officers are off the job while investigators look into their alleged ties to Broward's notorious Ponzi schemer.
Scott Rothstein and Bob Norman has their side of the story.
We're doing a story about the suspension.
Yeah.
We wanted to give you a chance to respond. When I asked Broward Sheriff's Lieutenant Frank Belanti, the number 2 man in BSO's Tamarack Bureau, about his sudden suspension, the 26-year veteran said he had no idea why he'd been taken off duty.
I'm suspended. Hey, but I'm not informed yet. What the allegation?
Sources say both Belanti and Sergeant Matthew Baldwin have been swept up in the wide-ranging probe of convicted Ponzi schemer Scott Rothstein. We're told that it was tied to the Rothstein investigation.
I don't know that. They're not telling me on the form from my age. It said conduct unbecoming, so that's all I know.
The suspensions follow the criminal convictions of BSO Lieutenant David Benjamin and Detective Jeff Poole, who served as muscle for Rothstein, using their badge to falsely arrest a co-conspirator's estranged wife and do other illicit favors for the fraud artist. Did you have any ties to Rothstein?
No.
Scott Rothstein? Do you think it might have been Poole or Benjamin?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it could be. I know them. I mean, it could be, but I don't know.
An attempt to reach Baldwin in his gated community was unsuccessful. Baldwin signed off on that false arrest as a supervisor and was suspended twice last year, once for carrying an unsecured basketball hoop on his patrol car and another for overtime abuse. Belanti has no such trouble on his resume and defended his name.
I am a good guy. I'm a straight up cop. I mean, just gotta wait and see.
BSO's Public Corruption Unit is handling both of these investigations, which BSO promises will be both methodical and thorough. At BSO, I'm Bob Norman, Local 10 News.
And according to Bob, federal agents on the Rothstein investigation are expecting to make more arrests in the next few weeks.
All right, still to come, my personal perspective about some really awful reading test results from Florida third graders. The news, not good.
This is a live look now from our Hollywood Beach Tower Cam. Looks like a lot of people enjoying the day.
On a beautiful day. And let's get the real forecast now from meteorologist Roland Stedham.
Hi, everybody. As the sun was coming up this morning, it revealed what kind of a day we were going to be seeing here around South Florida. And that was going to be a day filled with a mixture of sunshine and clouds. This easterly flow is going to continue to generate some occasional showers and a scattering of thunderstorms around some of the inland areas. Also, on top of that, we've got this area of low pressure out here in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a low in the upper levels of the atmosphere. It's not tropical in nature, but over the next few days, that's going to be sending some little surges of moisture in our general direction. So the bottom line is, between the east flow and that disturbance in the Gulf, we will be seeing some rain around, on again, off again, for the next 5 to 7 days or so. Planning on going out on the water today, easterly winds at about 10 to 15 knots. He's running about 1 to 2 feet inside the reef in the Keys. And for Dade and Broward County, small craft need to exercise caution. Easterly winds at about 10 to 20 knots, with seas running about 2 to 5 feet. Let's show you the 7-day forecast, and you'll see there's that mixture of sunshine and clouds in the forecast today, a scattering of showers, then a few thunderstorms expected Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday as well. Have a great day.
Roland, thanks. Now, before we leave you this morning, a personal perspective about some FCAT results that came out the other day. You may have missed them, but they are worth noting and despairing over. 57% of third graders in the state who took the FCAT reading exam, they passed with a score of 3 or better. Good for them. But 43% of the kids who took that reading test failed it, and most of them were black and Hispanic. Here are the numbers. Read them and weep. 61% of black kids in Florida failed that third grade reading test. 48% of Hispanic kids failed. And among children whose first language is not English, 81% failed the reading test. Our state education commissioner, Pam Stewart, says she is satisfied with these results. Well, I'm not. And you shouldn't be either. This is a recipe for disaster. As these kids get older, they will need remedial help if they ever hope to read at a proficient level. Many will get that help this summer, and if they improve enough, they will be promoted to 4th grade. But state policy says kids are not supposed to get social promotions. Kids are supposed to advance based on academic merit. How in the world will the thousands of kids who failed this basic reading test be able to perform as 4th graders? Our country is having a robust discussion about inequality, about the redistribution of wealth. The simple solution to fixing inequality begins with education. It is the great equalizer. Our schools are working hard to help these kids, but they've got to work harder. When nearly half of all third graders are not reading at grade level, we've got a serious problem. That's my perspective for this week. Hope you have a great Sunday. Remember, as always, stay informed, get involved.
That is our television hour. It ends here, but we are taking it online for the next hour. And so we invite you to weigh in on anything we've talked about today or anything else that you like as well. Right there on your screen, email, Facebook address, Twitter. It is great to have you with us, and we hope you will interact.
Have a great Sunday.